So today we'll start by going over our upcoming trainings and then dive into details about the exam format, take a look at the exam environment, go over what's covered on the exam and how you can prepare for it, and then we'll finish up with a short practice exam. If you haven't joined our Alteryx community yet, I highly recommend that you join and check out the wealth of information that's available to help you out there. Our community is very active and there are always people willing to help out with your questions, and there are a lot of ways for you to get involved, whether it's joining a user group, discussing topics on forums, or submitting an idea. Part of the community is the Alteryx Academy, where we have interactive lessons, weekly live trainings like the one you're participating in today, and we have over 140 weekly challenges that give you a place to test out your designer skills in new ways and, of course, certifications. And we'll talk more about these learning avenues throughout the session today and how each one can help you prepare for the exam. So we have 4 really great live trainings coming up in the next month. Our next one is on prescriptive optimization, and then in December we have in-database workflows, fuzzy matching for beginners, and making dynamic workflows. So I highly recommend that you check those out, especially making dynamic workflows can save you a ton of time if you have repetitive workflows that you're running all the time. So first we'll start off with a quick overview of the certification program and how you can leverage it to become better at designer. So the certification program is really designed to help you not only prove your skills, but also help you improve your skills. And I saw this quote recently, and I thought it was kind of a good observation about the way that some cultures focus on testing. And we know that the real test doesn't happen during a 2-hour certification exam. It happens for you at work when your boss needs a report by lunch, or your business leaders need quick answers to their questions, or you're trying to solve a really complex problem. So life presents you with these real tests all the time. So our certification exam is really designed as another way for you to continue learning so that you're even more prepared when you do get those tests in real life. Many tech certifications revolve around a high-stakes exam, so you might pay $500, you have one chance to pass, and if you don't pass, you're out a lot. This usually creates an environment where people are really focused on passing, not so much learning. So that's why our program is different. The exam is approachable and accessible, so you can use it as another way to learn, as well as a way to prove your skills and knowledge. And when you're presented with these real-life tests during your job, you're almost always able to use whatever resources you need. So we think it's fair that you should be able to use these same resources during the exam. All of our exams are open book, or a better way to say it is open resource. Since a core certification exam is intended to be a learning tool just as much as it is an assessment tool, the exam was created to prompt you to research and trial and search the community. But if you spend the whole time researching each question, you will run out of time. And in the end, our hope is that through certification and through this experience, you're able to assess your strengths and weaknesses, close those gaps with meaningful learning, and apply what you've learned to become a better Alteryxer who is empowered to solve the impossible. And we want to help you advance your knowledge, advance your skills, advance your career, and that's why we're free, to provide you with this experience that lends itself to the idea that you should never stop learning. And we found that the vast majority of people, even those who have been using Alteryx for years, learn something during the exam. Most of us, when we're learning something new, especially when it comes to our jobs, we just learn what we need to accomplish the task at hand, which makes sense. It is a tool in your job, but Designer is a really powerful tool, and so there might be things that you've overlooked, and through certification, you'll discover those things you didn't know Designer was capable of, and as a result, the things that you can be capable of doing. We currently offer 3 levels of certification around Designer: Core, Advanced, and Expert. Both the Core and Advanced exams are online and free, and Expert is a practical application exam, so it's proctored and it's only offered at certain times throughout the year. Each exam has a prerequisite of completing the exam before it, and when you pass, you're certified for 2 years. After 2 years, your certification status expires, but you can keep your status active by passing the same level exam again or passing a more advanced exam. So now we'll take a look at some details around the format of the exam so you'll know what to expect. So this is a 2-hour timed exam. It must be finished in one sitting, so make sure when you decide to take it that you have allowed yourself the full 2 hours. There are 80 questions, and it's an 80% pass threshold. It is free, and it is open book or open resource. And your exam access is sent via email at the beginning of each month. So if you were to register today, you would be getting your exam access at the beginning of December. You do have 3 attempts per month, but you also have unlimited attempts in the fact that if you take 3 attempts per month and you don't pass, you can continue to take it the next month as well. And we're always testing on the latest version of Designer. So you might have seen that we had a release recently, and so you'll be seeing in December that the test is going over that most recent release. And really the biggest component here is time. 2 hours seems like a really long time, but it does go by really quickly during the exam. So we'll go over some suggestions for pacing and some exam strategies in a little bit to show you how you can use that time to the best of your ability. So we have 5 exam question types on the exam, and you'll get to see an example of each of those during the practice exam at the end. Some of the practical application questions do require you to download a data set and work with it in Designer to find the correct solution, so you'll definitely need to have Designer open during the exam. And most of these question types you're used to seeing: multiple choice, true, false, multiple selection, or a select all that apply. We do have some matching, and then those practical application. And even though the practical application is asking you to solve something, you'll still be selecting a multiple choice option or options. So the questions are broken down into categories, and I want to show you how many questions in each category there will be on the exam. And for the most part, you'll see that they're categorized by tools that are similar or from the same palettes. And despite the questions being nicely organized here into categories, the exam does deliver them in random order. So there will be 3 questions on output, 4 on find, replace, and append, 4 on select and sample, 4 on sort and data cleanse, 4 on summarize, 5 on browse and results, 5 on crosstab and transpose, 5 on input, parse, filter and unique will have 6 questions, join and union 8, formula and expressions is a big category. There's 10 questions that covers that. There's 10 general questions and 7 practical application questions. And not everyone gets the same exact questions. The exam does draw from a bank of questions for each exam attempt. And the questions in the practical application category really assess your ability to use the other tools together to find a solution and create an outcome. So scoring is going to require a 80% to pass. All of the multiple choice questions are worth 1 point each. Practical application questions are worth 3 points each. They are more time consuming to solve, and for these questions you do get partial credit for multiple selection. So if you see a practical application question that says select all that apply, you can get partial credit for selecting part of those that are correct. But you will also get points deducted for incorrect selections. Now I want to show you the actual exam environment and what it looks like so that you know kind of what to expect on exam day and you won't need to spend time figuring out how to take the exam. You can just focus on solving the actual questions. So before you get to the opening page, your experience will be getting an email at the beginning of the month with a link and an access code, and you'll be able to click the link. It'll take you to our online exam platform, and then you'll need to enter your access code that you've been sent to verify your registration. Then you'll need to fill out your personal information, and a couple notes on this. Make sure that you enter your first and last name as you would like it to appear on your certificate. So if you want a full formal name on your certificate, enter it that way here. And then make sure you enter the address, the email address that you'd like to have your results sent to. And also important is entering your community username to get a badge on the community. So when you are logged into the community, you'll find your username on the top right-hand corner. Now, you can register for the exam without being registered for the community. So it's important to know that those are two separate registration processes. And if you haven't registered or signed up for the community, do that before you take the exam so that you can enter your username in there and get that badge on community. So after you enter that information, you'll kind of get this final exam breakdown that gives you the instructions, lets you know the number of questions, the amount of time that you have, again reminds you that it must be finished in one sitting, and has a pass mark of 80%. And here it does let you know that you'll be able to finish with some questions unattempted, and you can go back and change your answers. And one thing to note here is that once you select continue at the bottom of this page, the exam and your attempt has begun. So you aren't prompted with an additional heads up that your exam is beginning. You are just right into the exam once you hit continue. Now, once you're actually inside the exam, there are several parts of the exam interface that can help you sort of pace and strategize with the exam. So at the top, you'll see the time remaining, which is an important way to pace yourself. Your name will be on the top right, and then you'll have the question number. So this is really helpful to keep note of what questions you need to revisit. I always suggest that you have a piece of paper just to take notes as far as, oh, maybe question 7 I wasn't sure of and I want to go back and change that one. So you have your list of maybe 5 or 6 questions you weren't sure about. So if you get a chance, you want to go back and look at those. And it'll also help you with your pacing because you'll know where you are in the exam with the time you have left. The question value is also really important because there are those 7 practical application questions, and they're usually pretty obvious, but you'll want to make sure that if you see a question that's worth 3 points, you are spending more time on it because it is worth more. And then in the main part here, you'll see one question. It's only one question per page, and answers are not required for each question to continue moving forward, but we don't suggest you just leave them blank in case you run out of time. You don't want to submit something without an answer. But if you do want to return to it at a later time, you can. And then on the bottom, you have your ways to move to the next question and move to a previous question. And at the very bottom, you'll see Display Previously Saved Questions, and this is a drop-down menu that can be really helpful when you get to the end and you say, okay, I need to go back and check those 5 or 6 questions and I have 10 minutes. Use this drop-down here to just jump to those specific questions so that you can review them before submitting. Then you will get to basically your last question and you will see a Finish Now. And once you feel really good about all of your selections and you've reviewed any questions, you just confirm your Finish Now. If you do if you basically spend your entire 2 hours, it will submit the exam at the end for you. So don't worry if 2 hours elapses and you just don't remember to confirm your Finish Now. It's still been submitted for you. So immediately after you submit, you will see results letting you know if you've passed or failed, and you will see your overall score, so your percentage there. If you don't pass, you'll also receive an email with a breakdown of your results per category, which will look like this. So you won't get results on a question-by-question basis, but you can use these category results to focus your studying and kind of understand your weaknesses. So for example, this user here did really great on input and output questions, but should probably spend some more time learning select and sample, and also on some practical application pieces. So this is a really good way to guide your future studying. If you do pass, you will receive an email with your certificate and logo, and your badge will be added to community within 48 hours. So when it comes to exam strategy, one of the most important things to consider is the amount of time you have and how you'll pace yourself throughout the exam. Since there are 80 questions, if you simply divided the number of questions by the total time, it'd come out to about 90 seconds per question. But remember that the 7 practical application questions are actually worth 3 points, so you should plan on spending a little bit more time on those questions. And we have a recommendation of about how many minutes you should spend on each question. Of course, this is going to vary depending on your knowledge of the questions. So not each question is going to take you the same amount of time. So if you are able to move through some of them quickly, it'll give you more time to look up those that you're not familiar with. And again, you can use a timer inside the exam platform along with a question number to help you see where you're at with your pace. So when it comes to actually answering the questions, guessing is always better than not answering. So even if you're not sure, it's better to take a guess at it. The only time that you are penalized for guessing is on multi-select practical application questions. So you'll know these because they will be worth 3 points, and at the end of the question it'll say select all that apply. So there might be 4 or 5 choices, and you could choose one or all 5 of them. And you get partial credit awarded for each correct answer, but you also get partial points deducted for each incorrect answer. So for this case, you don't want to just select every answer that kind of looks right. Less is more on this one. And remember that you can move back in the exam environment to see if you've left any questions unanswered. In the drop-down menu on the bottom right, or sorry, on the bottom left of that exam interface, when you are skipping to another question, it does show questions that you have not provided an answer for in gray. So you can quickly do a visual scan to make sure that you've provided an answer for each question. So when it comes to a larger strategy, if you finish the exam and you don't pass, identify the problem areas before you forget them, and then retake the exam as soon as you're done with your additional studying. You don't want to wait too long because you're likely to forget what you struggled with, and you might forget some of what you learned. So you want to take advantage of the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which really says if you're taking the exam and then you study, you want to take it again quickly when you're remembering and your recall is at the peak, not at the pit. So plan time. I always tell people plan time to take it more than once. Most people have to take the exam more than once to pass. So it's easier if you just set the expectation that you'll maybe take it on a Monday, you'll study if you don't pass, and then you'll take it again later that week. So again, our exam tests not only the knowledge of your knowledge of Designer, but also knowledge on how to find the right answer. We don't expect you to memorize every single thing in Designer because that would be insane. There's so much to remember. There are 3 resources that I recommend that everyone has open during the exam. The first one is Designer. Not only will you need Designer for practical application questions, but the global search bar in the top right-hand corner is really powerful. It searches the tools within Designer, the help documentation, and community. So this should sort of be your first place to go if you're unsure of a question. Just pop it into the global search bar and go from there to find the resources that will help you answer the question. So again, it searches your global search searches help documentation, but that's also a good resource to have open before you begin your exam. And then, of course, community is also searched by the global search bar. Again, I would have that open and ready to go. And within Designer, I also suggest that you're really familiar with the one-tool examples. Using these can be especially helpful if you want to see how the configuration of a tool behaves and affects the output. So if you're not familiar with these, when you click on a tool in the tool palette right below the description of the tool, you can open up an example, and once you run that workflow, it really gives you a really cool way to see how it's interacting with data sets in different configurations. So the big question really is, what's actually on the exam and how do I prepare for it? So we're going to jump into that, and hopefully this might spur some questions for you guys. If you do have questions about specifically what's on the exam, please let us know. So like I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the 4th part of the core preparation series. The first 3 trainings are a Kickstarter to the tools that are covered in the exam, and you'll get a chance to really see, practical examples of the tools in action. So I suggest that watching these trainings is a really great way to get your exam preparation started, and those are available now in the Alteryx Academy in the Live Training tab. You can see there's inputs, outputs, and data types in part 1, Prep and Blend in Part 2, and Part 3, there's Transform and Documentation. So the Core Certification Exam Prep Guide provides you with everything you need to know to prepare for and pass the exam. You can find it on the certification page on Community, and we'll refer to the resources in this guide that will help you with exam preparation. So these are the tools that are covered on the exam. And the Alteryx Designer Core Certification Exam is really intended to test your aptitude around the tools in Designer that are used most often and are fundamental in data preparation and analysis. So this core tool set is the foundation for all of analysis in Designer. And in addition to these tools, we'll cover elements of the interface of Designer, like basic workflow building concepts, which are a bit more global and not tool specific. So even though that's a fairly small subset of tools, about 20 tools, you're really going to want to prepare to do a deep dive into these tools. So it's a small subset, but you're going to really need to become familiar inside and out with their functionality and behaviors. And this is important not only for the exam, but because these tools really are the foundation for more advanced analytics. So it's important to fully understand what you can do with these tools so that you can get the most out of Designer. So when we say you need to do a deep dive into the tools, what does that really mean? There are 4 main things you'll want to make sure that you can do with each tool. And we'll show you an example of each of these as well. The first one is being able to identify the functionality, strengths, and limitations of the tool. So this is just the general idea of what can this tool do? What does it do to analyze, transform the data? What are its strengths and limitations? The second one is identifying when the tool will be used to create a given output. So there'll be questions on the exam where you're given an output and a selection of tools, and you have to decide, okay, if this is my input and this is my output, what tool would create this? The third is to be able to configure the tool to create a given output. So configuration options in tools can be pretty simple to very complicated depending on the tool that you're looking at. So this is where some of that really the minutia comes in as far as configurations go, because checking one box might make all the difference in how the tool is handling your data, and it's going to make a difference on if you get the question correct or not on the exam. And then the last thing is you want to be able to differentiate the functionality of similar tools. So for example, join and union are kind of similar. Crosstab and transpose are also similar, and they're commonly can be confused with one another. So you'll want to make sure that you know which tools perform similar functions and how those two tools are different. So as an example of a question that deals with basic tool functionality, a tool container can be disabled from the canvas, true or false. This would be an example of that, making sure that you're able to identify a tool's functionality. When it comes to identifying what tool creates a given output, you'll see here you have an input, a question mark where the tool should be, and an output. And in this situation, you'll really want to look at, okay, what clues do I have that could help me understand which of these options is the correct one? For this example, we have identifying the configuration of a tool. So this might be like the question you see here, where you're simply choosing the configuration options that are typed out in text, but you also might have to choose what kind of a configuration option you would have based on a screenshot. So again, that's where really paying attention to making sure all of the correct boxes are checked and things are entered will make a big difference. Here's an example of differentiating tools that are similar. So for this one, we have, a very similar crosstab and transpose situation, and you'll need to be able to determine which one of those is the correct answer, which As a heads up, some of these questions are taken directly from the one tool examples, so the more that you study those and become familiar with those, the better chance you will have of really recognizing how some of these tools are operating. And you'll be able to use it as a resource to quickly look things up. So now that you kind of have a better understanding of exactly what you need to be able to do with each tool, you can do a self-assessment to see where your weaknesses are. So in the core exam prep guide, there's a self-assessment page that can guide you through gauging your ability with each tool. And once you've identified some tools that you need to brush up on, there are a few ways that you can do tool-specific preparation. So the very first thing that you should check out are the interactive lessons on the Alteryx Academy. These short lessons can really get you up to speed on tools really quickly. For example, there are a lot of questions about the formula tool and expressions on the exam, and the formula tool has so much functionality that sometimes it's hard to understand everything it can do, but we have a whole series of lessons that can help you understand the formula tool, and in under an hour, you can get this great overview of what it can do and how you can use it. I'd also suggest that you check out the Tool Mastery series on Community. So these are knowledge-based articles about the tools that can kind of give you a different perspective on the tools, and you can see them used in different ways. So as opposed to this being a specific lesson or a specific formal help documentation, this is sort of somebody's particular take or perspective on a tool, how it can be used, and sometimes they have funny jokes and pictures in them, so they're pretty entertaining. And then, of course, the last resources to help you take a deep dive into specific tools that I mentioned before as good open book resources for the exam are the one tool examples and the help documentation. So I suggest that you use the one tool example area as kind of a tool playground. They've already got the data sets connected to the tool, so you can feel free to play around with the configurations or connect other tools to them and really explore what they can do in a pretty quick and easy fashion. And the best part about becoming familiar with these resources during your tool preparation is that you won't need to memorize everything. You'll know where to go to quickly look things up, and you'll be ahead of the game on exam day. So if you want to have more specifics on exactly what you should know for the exam, in addition to those 4 things for each tool, you'll find an exam outline in the prep guide that kind of gives you additional hints. And the guide also has a complete curriculum that you can follow to prepare for the exam, and it includes interactive lessons, tool mastery articles, help documentation, and other resources that you can use to learn everything you need to know to pass the exam. So you could use this and just look up the areas and the topics that you know you need help with, or you could take it from the beginning to the end if you're newer and just want to get onboarded with Designer quickly. And pay really special attention to the content in the interactive lessons. The questions on the exam are closely tied to the content in those lessons. So when it comes to the practical application questions, which are typically the most difficult for people to get correct on the exam, one of the best resources that you can use is the weekly challenge on the Academy. And the weekly challenge index shows you all of the challenges that are available and also gives you the level of difficulty of each one and the main topic it covers. So this really helps you sort through the over 140 challenges and find the ones that will help you the most, not just for preparing for the exam, but also to help move your skill level up every single week. One of the biggest benefits of doing weekly challenges is getting to see the variety of ways that other people are solving the same exact problem. So if you're not familiar with weekly challenge, people post their solutions. So depending on how long a challenge has been posted, you might see pages and pages of solutions that you can look at and see, oh, how many tools did this person use, or how do they use different tools to get to a similar outcome. And as you look at other people's workflows, you'll see how you can take many paths in Designer to get to the same destination. And looking at these different paths can really help you see some of the tools in a different way than maybe you're used to using them. And I know when I started doing weekly challenges, one of the things that I thought was the most helpful was I would start the weekly challenge on my own, start solving it, and then when I got to a place where I was stuck, I would take a look at some of these solutions that were posted and find the place or the person that seemed like they had started off similarly to me. So we were already kind of going down the same path, and that would help me, say, oh, this is the next tool, or oh, this is how I'm going to get unstuck, and this is how I'm going to actually solve this problem. And finally, we like to tell people that one of the best ways to prepare for the exam is to actually take the exam. So some people have a lot of anxiety about taking tests, but remember, this is a low-stakes exam that allows you to focus on learning. So if you're feeling anxious about taking the exam, even after you've done your preparation, my recommendation is to take the exam, but do not plan on passing it. If you pass it, that's great, and it's a happy surprise, but use it as another study tool and plan on really taking your time to look up the answer to each question you don't know. And you'll probably run out of time and you won't get through the whole exam if you look up every single question, but you'll quickly learn what you didn't know and become better prepared for your next attempt. So in an effort to get you as comfortable as possible with the exam, we're going to take a little practice exam now so you can see how exam questions are actually formatted within the exam platform. So each question is a screenshot directly from the exam environment, so this will help you get acquainted with the look and the feel of the exam. And additionally, you'll get to see an example of each question type: multiple choice, true false, matching, multiple selection, and practical application. So I'll put the question up on the screen, give you about 75 seconds to solve the first three, which are all worth 1 point, and then I'll give you some extra time for the last one, which is a practical application question, and that one is worth 3 points, so we'll give you more time. So here's our first question, which is an example of multiple choice. All right, we're just at over a minute, so we will go over the answer to this one. So C is an invalid configuration for the Select Records tool. All of the other configurations are valid ways that the Select Records tool can take the information and give you the correct records that you're looking for. In this particular question, the examples of A, B, and D, the 55 plus, the 1 through 2, 5 through 7, are all actual examples that they give you within Designer in the One Tool example and in the configuration area. All right, and we'll go to the next question, and feel free, if you don't know the answer to these questions, to go into Designer or some of the resources that we talked about and actually look them up to see how long it might take you, or go into your global search bar. All right, your next question is matching. So this one's a little bit more difficult to understand because I needed 2 screenshots to show you how it actually works in the exam. So the first screenshot is what you will see: match the delimiter to the description for the text columns tool. When you press down the drop-down menu on Select, that's what you see in the bottom screenshot there. And so you'll just go down through each selection and match the correct delimiter. And I'll give you guys a minute to do that. Okay, so it looks like some of you already got the correct answers there, filling that out in the Q&A box. So your correct delimiters you can see here, and you'll find these delimiters all over, whether you're looking at help documentation or within Designer, within the one tool examples. Did anyone look this one up and find it somewhere? Did everybody just know this one? You guys can chat in the chat panel or in the Q&A panel. It's always interesting to see if people are looking things up, how quickly they can find the answers, because 1 minute or a little over 1 minute doesn't seem like a lot of time initially. But many of these you can look up within 1 minute. Somebody looked in the community and was able to find it, it looks like within 1 minute, so that's quick. Somebody else knew it with regular expressions, so you're ahead of the game for sure. So yeah, just because you don't know the answer to a question when you get to that exam, don't panic and just skip it. Know that you have that 1 minute to actually take and look something up. And I think you'll be surprised how quickly you can find answers within that amount of time if you're familiar with your resources. And I always think about how long it takes to microwave something for 1 minute. It seems like it takes forever because you're waiting for it. So remember, you have a microwave minute to look it up. All right, we will check out the next one. This is a really simple, straightforward, true, false question most people are used to. I'll give you a minute on this one. This is also a great one to look up if you can look up quickly if you don't know the answer right away. Okay, so the select tool provides the save field configuration is a .yxft file. This is true. And I think this is a really good example of a question that is focused on a tool, right? It's the select tool, but this isn't necessarily something that you would know just by using the select tool for its main functionality. So this is a good example of sort of that understanding the details of what each tool can do. So our last question here is our practical application question. Hopefully you guys can see this well enough, or it's big enough image on your screen. So if you'll notice that on the top right-hand corner here of the question, it does say that's worth 3 points. So if you start to see questions like this, or ones that seem more complicated, or ones where you need to download a data set, those are all of your cues to look up and say, oh, is this worth 3 points? Yes, I should spend more time on it. So for this one, you do have a select all that applies. So this would be one of those where you get partial points for the question, so choose carefully. And when you're looking at these 4 options, really look in your head and try to figure out which ones, what each function of each tool does and how it would transform your data set. And if you can't visualize it in your head, open up Designer, open up those one tool examples, and you just use the input and output data set here, and you can kind of get a better way of seeing how it would transform your data and which ones would make that output. And I'll give you guys 2 or 3 minutes here. You're at about 1:40 on this question, so I'll give you another minute, and then we'll look at the answer. So before we go over the answer to this question, Joe pointed out something that's really key about these. When you see these workflows, it's not just about which one might be the best answer or the best workflow. You need to find which ones will make that output happen. So even if it's not the way that you would do it, or you think one way is better than the other. If it works, it is correct. So again, this kind of comes back to that idea that there's many different paths that you can take to get to the same destination to designer, and we are asking you to recognize which of those are ways that will get you there, even if they're a little bit different than how you might do it. So for this one, you'll see that 2 of these are actually correct. And when you're looking at the the differences between these two, what you could is that, they're both going to get you to that end answer. And the other ones, like this one here, is obviously asking you to differentiate between crosstab and transpose. So that's a key part to this question. So if you're able to do that with these tools, even though it's a practical application question, you're going to be a lot further along.
Yeah, I'm going to just jump in here too, just as a reference to one of our past trainings for this example, because you are on limited time here. It is really important to know the behaviors of each of these tools. So as you approach this problem, it's more important to eliminate things first than it is to select things that are right. So from my previous training, there's a few things that I'm looking at when I approach this problem. The first of which is you'll see that there's a lot of crosstabs and transposes, right, in these solutions. I'm going to go back to one of the big rules of thumb that I mentioned in our previous training, that anytime you transpose, aka option 4 there's only going to be 2 fields output, and their names are going to be name and value, right? And if I'm looking at my result set, I see it's named bananas and oranges. So I already know that one is completely out of the solution. If there was a select tool after it, right, I might be back in the game and have to dig a little deeper. But I know at a very superficial level, I don't even need to address that question coming back. The other thing that most of you probably observed is that product field became the header values at the output file. So bananas and oranges went from one column to actually being column names themselves. So we know that's a crosstab. So at that point, I'm at a point where I understand that there's 3 options. 2 of them contain crosstab. I'm just going to backlog those and revisit those a little deeper. The final one is that summarize, which doesn't transpose or pivot your data at all. So that one is actually ruled out. So I'm down to 2 now, and I'm going to go back and just compare sample to select records, right? And if you're familiar with each of those, you'll know that each of those will define a subset of data in the way that I could for this one. So I'm going to go with those 2 as my solution in that approach.
Yeah, thank you for adding that in. This is one of those examples where time is definitely of the essence, and if you can quickly eliminate certain ones, you'll be able to really dig into the other ones that are actually options that you might want to choose. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up. So make sure that, especially on your first time through the exam, you really do spend time understanding what these practical application questions are like. So looks like we've been monitoring any questions throughout the session, and it doesn't look like there are any unanswered questions, but I'll just give everyone a second here if you do have any outstanding questions to enter that into the Q&A. And if you do think of a question later on, please feel free to email us at certification@alteryx.com. Doesn't look like there are any questions coming in. Just as a reminder that we do have really great avenues for support for you. So the first one we've talked about, the Alteryx community, really is a great way for you to post your questions, search discussion forums. The chances are if you have a question, somebody else has probably had that same question, and all you need to do is go to community, search, find the question somebody already posted, and you'll immediately have an answer, usually more than one answer, because the community is so active. And if you want to contribute and find questions that other people have, maybe someone has had a similar thing that you had to work through and you can make somebody else's job easier, that's a great way to contribute to the community as well. Our second resource is Alteryx Academy, where you can find all things to learn and build your skills. And then, of course, if you do have a technical question, our technical support is there for you as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us today, and we look forward to having all of you become core certified, and we look forward to having you join us for the advanced certification prep session in the future after you become core certified. Have a great day, guys.